started in a minute. Yeah, there we go. We're good. I'll wait 1 more minute till we get started.
Perfect.
Oh, I got to change my name on the bottom. This is Patrick's account, so.
I saw you were masquerading.
Rename, yeah. There we go. And I see a whole bunch of people coming online, so we'll just wait a little bit longer.
Great.
It must be kind of a bummer to be stuck in Minneapolis when you could be up north.
I know. Well, it was locked down for everybody for a while, and then on Monday they opened up.
Okay.
This week. So.
Let's see.
But yeah, it's always pretty hit or miss the first couple of weeks of the season, just because the ice is still on the lakes, as you know.
Yep.
Well,
why don't we get started? Good evening, everyone. Welcome to another one of Fly Fishers International's online Zooms. My name is Dave Peterson, and I'm chair of the FFI Conservation Committee. Tonight's webinar is the second in a series of webinars that we're doing, and we're hosting these meetings with conservation leaders from across the country to illustrate the challenges that our fisheries face and the possible solutions to those challenges. Before we start, a little housekeeping. Those of you watching can click the little Q&A down at the bottom close to right-hand side of your screen and type in questions. And as we proceed along, we'll try to answer all those questions for you. And I'll be able to see them, and we'll just answer them on a timely basis. Tonight, we're really pleased to have as our guest Spencer Shaver of Sportsmen for the Boundary Waters, or Save the Boundary Waters, whichever you want to call it. He works with both organizations. And Spencer's going to talk with us about the mining threats to the incredible Boundary Waters Wilderness. Spencer and I have been talking beforehand. This webinar has special meaning for me. Me and a bunch of buddies spent 14 consecutive summers for about 14 days up in the Boundary Waters Wilderness, and the last 6 of those were with my son. So we have plenty of favorable memories. And as Spencer will tell you later, there's probably the best smallmouth bass fishing in the world, and some pretty decent walleye fishing and pike as well. So Spencer, we really appreciate you joining us tonight.
Yeah, thanks for having me. And 14 years strong, 14 days apiece, that's quite the record. It's no joke.
Let's jump into tonight's topic. Spencer, for our listeners that haven't been lucky enough to be into the Boundary Waters, can you give a quick description of the wilderness that you're trying to protect?
Yeah, absolutely. And thanks again for having me, Dave. Yeah, I'm here with Sportsmen for the Boundary Waters. I'm a conservation director for Sportsmen for the Boundary Waters, and we work to permanently protect the watershed of the Boundary Waters from some proposed copper nickel mining, and we do that through advocacy and education. And so, yeah, to answer your question, Dave, the Boundary Waters is actually America's most visited wilderness area. Over 150,000 people a year go to the Boundary Waters, and it's 1.1 million acres of wilderness, over 1,100 lakes, hundreds of miles of cold water streams that, are all great for fly fishing, draw hunters and anglers from across the country, as well as people who like to paddle, people who like to get in the backcountry a little bit. And like you point out, you can string together trips that are a month long through the Boundary Waters and never leave the wilderness. So it's really right in northeastern Minnesota, right off the coast of Lake Superior, up the Superior Hiking Trail a little bit, and you'll get to the Boundary Waters. And I'm sure folks who have tuned in have gone, and for those who haven't, they're waiting for you. So.
Terrific. Tell us more about Sportsmen for the Boundary Waters and your mission. How long have you been at this? What kind of challenges are you facing? Tell us more about the mine. Just give us the 360 of that.
Yeah, absolutely. So Sportsmen for the Boundary Waters was founded in 2015. And like I said, we work to permanently protect the watershed of the Boundary Waters from this proposed mine. We do that through really focusing on wildlife and fish and wildlife in particular. And, you know, the effects this proposed mine would have on the Boundary Waters. And so, yeah, before I go any further, the Twin Metals mine is a proposed mine right on the edge of the Boundary Waters, not actually in the Boundary Waters, but on a river, the South Kawishwe River that flows out of the Boundary Waters and back in. And for folks who want to kind of track what I'm talking about here, you can also check us out at sportsmenbwca.org. We got a lot of maps and resources that kind of explain the issue. But yeah, the mine would be built on the South Kawishwe River right on Birch Lake, which is right on a little bow that goes out of the Boundary Waters and right back in through the Falls Chain, which we were just talking about, Farm Lake. Essentially half the Boundary Waters lies downstream of this proposed project. And this is a new type of project to Minnesota. It's not an iron or taconite mine, which we have a bunch of, and cause relatively less problems for water quality. But this is a copper nickel mine, or really a sulfide ore mine. And the problem there is the waste rock near the copper. When that's separated from the copper in just the ore extraction process, that gets exposed to air and water. And when the sulfide in the rock is exposed to air and water, that creates sulfuric acid. And basically everywhere this type of mining has happened, heavy metals as well as that sulfuric acid get into nearby water, wetlands, groundwater. And for a place like the Boundary Waters, especially that's so interconnected, the fear is that any sort of contamination would spread across the entire Boundary Waters downstream of this project. And, you know, there's plenty of examples of these types of projects near water resources really not having a great track record. And so they're essentially saying that this would be the first to not pollute, right? And it's probably the worst place on the planet to try and test that theory out.
We got a question for you from Mark Rockwell from Northern California. Question is, does the Boundary Waters Wilderness link to the Lake of the Woods area in Ontario?
Yeah, that's a great question. And actually, it does. It's all downstream. So this is the Rainy River watershed. And everything north of, actually the watershed runs through the Boundary Waters. So it's just west of an entry points on the eastern side of the Boundary Waters will flow, you know, downstream toward Voyageurs National Park, Lake of the Woods. There are some mineral leases they're looking to develop directly upstream of Lake of the Woods in particular. There's 40 pending mineral exploratory leases beyond Twin Metals. So we've got this one project that's going through environmental review right now. They've just submitted a mine plan of operation. But to answer the question, there are hard rock leases being developed upstream of a lot of these water resources right downstream of the Boundary Waters as well. So
this is my own question, Spencer. The Boundary Waters is contiguous with the Quetico Wilderness located in Canada. Would this mine, if it failed, have the same negative impact on the Quetico? Does the watershed flow that direction?
Yeah, absolutely. So it hops back and forth right over Loch LaCroix on the western edge of the Boundary Waters. And yeah, if people want to see image of the way the water flows through the watershed, we actually have a graphic on our website at sportsmenbwca.org. Under threats, about us, and then threats, you can see kind of an infographic of what the actual hydrology is downstream of the mine site. And yeah, a bunch of the Quetico is connected to they share a border. For folks that haven't gone, the Boundary Waters abuts the United States border and goes directly against the border with Canada for a provincial park, the Quetico, which is also a couple 100,000 acres of wilderness, like the Boundary Waters, a little less maintained. And yeah, Quetico would absolutely feel the effects. They have a little bit less of a role in permitting and policy related to a project in America, but we definitely work with Canadian folks to try and you know, bring their perspective to the table. And it's a lot of similar folks, recreation folks, who, you know, would be directly affected by a change in water quality just across the border.
Interesting. Can you give us a kind of an overview of how you've tried to stop this so far, and kind of how that's gone for the Sportsmen for the Boundary Waters? Because I know I've been talking with you about this for probably 3 years at this point. We've been working with you, and
Sure.
seems like we take a step forward and then a step back, or maybe 2 steps back every once in a while.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. And you have been along for the ride. Much appreciated. Fly Fishing International has been a great partner along kind of this process. And, really what we're after here is something called mineral withdrawal. And that's accomplished through either an administrative order, something directed by the executive branch, or an act of Congress. And, this type of mining where someone will try and lease a hard rock lease upstream of a wilderness or a national park happens every now and then. It happened actually recently near upstream of Yellowstone. And last year in 2019, in the John Dingell Conservation Act, there was actually a Yellowstone Gateway Protection Act passed. And so that's our end goal, right? We're trying to get permanent protection from this type of mining. And for a while, we had some success in the administrative kind of realm. The Forest Service had begun a study setting aside the exact acreage we're looking to remove from the pool of available mineral leases to recommend, and there had been a moratorium in place on development of those leases. And so that started in 2016. Before that review, there's an environmental review associated with that to be completed. It was canceled, and Twin Metals were issued their leases outright. So that was a very controversial move. A lot of us cried foul in the conservation community and said, this is the exact type of review we should do upstream of the Boundary Waters. And since then, we haven't been able to see that review, which answers that question, is this the right type? Is this the right place for a mine of this type? And we've seen the Departments of Interior and Agriculture through Bureau of Land Management and the United States Forest Service working to issue more leases with less public input. And so our response to that now has been a bill in Congress, like they introduced for Yellowstone Gateway Protection Act. And that would just do what the administrative rule was supposed to, which was remove the leases because they pose a threat to the boundary waters and all these downstream jobs, all these people who depend on the boundary water staying the way it is now. And so, yeah, we introduced a bill in Congress in January this year, something that Fly Fishers International supports. Appreciate your support on that. And that basically completes that administrative withdrawal and just permanently protects the area. It allows for logging. It allows for iron mining, taconite mining. It allows for all the existing industry that happens in the Superior National Forest and just protects the boundary waters from copper mining, which is our goal. And so we're hoping to pass that through Congress now, through the House. It's been introduced in the House.
Cool. We got another question from Dennis O'Brien, who's from here in Michigan. Does this water flow into the Great Lakes?
That's a great question, Dennis. No, this is not. This is all the Rady River watershed. And there is actually a separate proposal called the Polymet mine along the same ore body that does flow into Lake Superior, or it would if it were developed. It has not been built yet. It's received permits. And we only work on the boundary water side of the watershed, but there are some great groups working on both. So there are 2 copper nickel mines, one being leased upstream of the Great Lakes and another being leased upstream of the boundary waters. We work on the boundary waters one.
Spencer, I know you've guided in the boundary waters and know those basically hundreds, maybe thousands of lakes. And for those of you that haven't been there, many of those are separated by really difficult portages where you carry your stuff on your back. So it's a real wilderness experience. But Spencer, can you tell our viewers about the fishery in general?
Yeah, happy to. We were just talking about maybe sitting down and circling a map one day when all this is over for our spots. But yeah, it's really some of the best fishing of its kind in the Midwest for sure. And it's a really unique type of fishing, mostly out of canoe. Some folks approach by kayak, or there's a few lakes on the edge of the boundary waters where motorboats are allowed to. But really the thing to do is this backcountry canoe fish. And you spoke to it earlier. We're coming up on probably the best time for topwater, smallmouth in the boundary waters or canoe country, northern Minnesota. And bass get really active early in the season. Lake trout and pike start feeding a little earlier than most. And yeah, if you can get in right after the ice mixes, or right before the ice mixes up with the rest of the lake, you can catch some really, really sizable pike early in the spring in shallow bays. And yeah, these fish don't get fish much either. There's not a lot of fishing pressure. Like I said, there's 150,000 visitors, but there's some lakes that get almost little to no pressure and have just some great hold up trout. There's a lot of great walleye fishing in the Boundary Waters. The walleye state record was set actually on Saginaw Lake on the Seagull River. So really just a world-renowned fishery, and there's a ton to do there. There's brook trout streams, splake lakes, whatever you're after, you can usually find in terms of freshwater species. There's something to be had for you in the Boundary Waters. So it's a bunch of fun, and there's a lot of different types of lakes too. There's some glacial lakes, there's some shallower, warmer lakes. So a lot of different habitat in a pretty concentrated area here.
Spencer, tell us a little bit about yourself. How did you get involved in this? And, what kind of challenges have you faced personally as you proceed on this route? Because those of us that have supported this realize that you're a linchpin in this movement. So tell us more about yourself.
That's much appreciated. I appreciate you saying that. It's, like you said, I started guiding trips in the Boundary Waters in college, and I was actually going to school in Washington, D.C. at the time, and I heard about two pretty famous guides, renowned guides, Dave and Amy Freeman, who were National Geographic explorers, and they had, I think this was in 2015 or 2014, decided to paddle from Washington, or from the Boundary Waters in northern Minnesota to Washington, D.C. to raise awareness about this project. And they collected petition signatures on their canoe the whole way. And so I heard about this as a student in D.C. and met them on the Potomac on their last day and paddled in with them. And I was only 18 or 19 at the time, but just got to see kind of what they were working on and what they were trying to accomplish, and came to understand the issue a little bit more in Minnesota. And I've worked on it since. I started out just volunteering, and here we are years later. And I think, part of the challenge in Minnesota mining is a big cultural part of our identity. And we get slapped with the tag anti-mining a lot, and just, it's much broader than that. I would say it's truly bipartisan group of people who enjoy going in the Boundary Waters. There's not a single partisan thing about going. And, it really is an effort to, one, protect the Boundary Waters, but two, protect this outdoor industry that has come to thrive around the Boundary Waters. There's 17,000 jobs there. Just dependent on the Boundary Waters, 140,000 jobs in Minnesota around outdoor recreation, a bunch in hunting and fishing. And I'd say that's probably our biggest challenge, is really taking that idea that, there's a real economic downside to not doing this. Whereas I think there's a lot to be gained economically by protecting the Boundary Waters and this type of thing.
Has there been any kind of polling among the outdoor community in that utilizes the wilderness that you're using to support your position?
Yeah, that's a good question. So we did some polling in 2017, I believe, just statewide, and about 69% of the state is opposed to this outright, and about 10% aren't quite sure how they feel, and about 20% really want to build the project. So, the majority of Minnesota really opposes this project, really wants to see the Boundary Waters protected. And, to your question about the outdoor community, we have been kind of organizing in different capacities around this issue. One, to just make it easier for people to comment on the public comment periods that are associated with environmental review. And so during that mineral withdrawal study I mentioned earlier, we had about 125,000 comments, and 93% of them supported Boundary Waters protection. So, of the people interested in the outcome here, it's really people who depend on the boundary waters who want to see it protected. And yeah, just some barriers politically, but some barriers to permanently protecting it for sure. But I think, the more I do the work, the more people I meet who are, I find out have great boundary water stories and want to see it protected.
Based on what you know about the politics right now, Spencer, do you envision this bill coming to the floor anytime soon, or is the COVID-19 crisis pushed it back to the back of the table in committees and everything else?
Yeah, that's a great question, and that's I check daily if the committees are back to work here in Congress. But I think there's going to be a lot of barriers to the passage of specific legislation not related to COVID for the next few months here. The earliest indication we have is a high priority for the bipartisan group of people who wrote the bill, and we hope to see it once they resume regular work. But I think the challenge and once it passes the House, hopefully it's a bipartisan bill. It's got broad support through the House. It will be to introduce it in the Senate and then to find a way to, couple that up with additional land management legislation and into some sort of package, or get it introduced in the Senate in the first place. So that's where we need a lot more help. We need some firepower from across the country for sure, as we need some help from other boundary waters advocates who want to get in touch with their elected officials, in particular their senators. And you can do that through our website, sportsmenbwca.org. Under actions, you can go send a message to your member of Congress, both the House and Senate at once. It says, support this, introduce this, and pass it. And that's really where we're at right now, and we won't know more until Congress is back to work.
So in terms of, make sure I understand you and our listeners understand, the best thing we can do right now is go to your website and send letters of support, especially to the senators from our states, right?
Correct. And if you just go to our action headquarters at sportsmenbwca.org, you can just fill out a form with your zip code, and we can figure out who your members of Congress are, and it will automatically contact them. And then if you're interested in getting more involved in the Action Center, there's a way to sign up to volunteer too, where you can get in touch with me and we can make a little plan for you to kind of organize within your community, your group of friends who fish, group of friends who may have used the boundary waters, to spread the word, because that's the way that this legislation I think is going to move, is with people power and our community kind of saying, no, this is a place too important to risk. So yeah, great question. The specific action right now is a message to your member of Congress. There will be further comment periods kind of the rest of the year where there'll be more, but when you send that message, it also signs you up for our email list, and we'll let you know future opportunities to comment or get more engaged.
Spencer, while we've got you here in the last few minutes of our webinar, are there any other conservation issues that are key to protection of the boundary waters? You're kind of freezing up.
Yeah, that's a great question.
So I didn't know whether you heard me or not, Spencer.
Like you, we work. I gotcha. Yeah, can you hear me, Dave?
Yeah, now we can hear you.
Okay, I got your question.
Something's happened to our internet.
Yeah, there's a lot of things.
Yeah.
Here, can you hear me?
Yeah, now I can.
Okay, great. There we are. This legislation, HR 5598, that's the Boundary Waters Protection and Pollution Prevention Act, is kind of our main focus right now, but we also help across a wide partnership of hunting and fishing groups working on permanent land and water conservation fund funding, a host of other management issues that affect conservation of the boundary waters. And we get involved in a number of, we sit on a statewide group with other hunting and fishing groups who, advocate for permanent funding of these environmental trust funds and funds that pay for conservation projects around the boundary waters. So there's absolutely other issues ongoing besides the proposed mine on the edge. And our mission is to advocate for all the fish and wildlife in the watershed of the boundary waters and protect them so we can have a huntable and fishable population for them for future generations. So
Terrific.
Try and stay active.
Spencer, we really appreciate you joining us tonight. This has been great, and I know everybody knows a lot more about this issue now, and I hope we can generate more support for you. Just be assured that Fly Fishers International is always going to support this. We're really committed to this, and the keynote to our organization is that we advocate for all fish in all waters, not just cold water streams. So the lakes that are warm and cool water in the boundary waters are really important to us. So we thank you very much for all the work you do every day.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it. The same to you all at Fly Fishing International. Thanks for supporting all the work we're doing on behalf of the boundary waters. And it's good to see you, Dave. Hope you're doing well.
Good to see you, Spencer. I hope you are doing well as well. I hope our audience will help spread the word on conservation conversations. Our next webinar is on May 21st at this same time to meet Rick Williams to learn about efforts to save salmon and steelhead in the Northwest. And check out our other webinars on the Learning Center, Jeff Courier's Global Fishing Adventures, and a lot of other good stuff. Everyone stay safe and have a good evening. Thanks for joining us. Thanks again, Spencer.
Thank you, Dave. Have a good one.
You too.